Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and good day to everybody. I'm recording half of this content so that you have some additional time during our physical class tomorrow. Okay, this topic is actually covering on project management. Okay, I believe you've been doing managing your projects, maybe um, uh, activities that you are conducting at your inasis, or maybe you have experience managing certain projects, right? So partly you have experiencing the practices under project management. So in this video, I'm covering on two of the objectives, which is to know the principal tasks of software project managers. Okay, so normally there is a project manager for us for certain project. Okay, and to describe the fundamental of software costing and project scheduling. Right, among the topics that we'll be covering in this first part of video is on software project management, project planning and scheduling. The remaining will be covered during our class face-to-face class. Okay, some definitions so that everybody is in a common term. Okay, software project management is actually very essential, very important for software engineering projects. Why? Because projects need to be managed. Okay. Why? Because we normally work within our constraint, which is related to the budget that is being allocated, and also in terms of the time that is allocated for that project. Right. So the person in charge managing the project is actually the project manager, right? And project manager need to ensure that the project can be delivered on time within the constraint. And the project, especially in software engineering context, we are referring to software. We should be producing high quality software. Okay, all right. Maybe some of you will be saying that even though you manage the project, sometimes you are still running out of time, right? So it is actually better to have better to manage it, right? Even though it's behind schedule, so it is still important to guarantee the project is successful, rather than not having management at all, not managing the project at all, because it will lead to the project failure. All right. So how do you know that a project has achieved its objective, or what is the criteria? Okay, the marking schema to make sure that the project is actually successful. Okay, so these are some of the criteria that you can refer to. Right, we have to make sure that the software is delivered to the customer within the agreed time. Okay, so within the budget, meeting the customer expectation, and maintain a coherent and well-functioning development team. Right, so 1, 2, 3 is on more on the customer side. The last one is more on the development team side. Right, so some challenges in project management related to software is that when you build software, it's intangible. You cannot hold it. Okay, so you can only use it. Right, so that's the challenge, because let's say given the time and budget, the software is delivered but it's not meeting fully of the customer expectation. So and the challenge is that if you build a car, the car is there, right? But if you build a software, it's maybe only half ready. So, and the customer might feel very dissatisfied with it, right? Right. And another thing about building software is that, especially in the context of software management, is most of the projects are often one-off project. Okay? It is only done, it is normally very customized. even though before this the manager has developed similar system before, okay, but they mo- but the project manager often experience different kind of problems, okay, because of the change of technology, because of the project manager is dealing with different kind of customer and so on. So even though the project manager has been is having experience for several years, but developing um, similar kind of software also bring different challenges. Okay, and software processes are variable. Okay, each software process are actually not the same across different projects, and also it is very specific to the organization. Okay, even though the company is developing similar system, but for different customer, sometimes the processes that they follow for project 1 and project 2 is still different. Okay, so that's the challenges for the project manager to manage them, right? Why all this happen? Because software systems are complex, and it use different technology, and due to that reason sometimes the project manager will be having different challenges managing almost similar projects. Okay, so these are the factors that the project manager always have to consider whenever he or she is managing the project. Okay, so at the back of his mind when he is planning for the project, he need to consider the company size. Okay, this can refer to the company size of the software development team as well. Okay, the kind of software customer uh, that he has to develop the software for. Okay, so uh, if you develop system for a hospital, for example, it's different. If the hospital is a public hospital and also uh, from a private hospital, okay, maybe because they have a different requirement, different culture, and so on. Also, in terms of the size, of course, bigger system, bigger software will of course take longer time. Software type, okay, whether it is mobile system, web system, whether it is mobile shopping software compared to online learning software, so it's different. Okay, and also in terms of the organizational culture, the way, because when you are developing a project, you are dealing with people. Okay, uh, different offices will have different culture, and also the factor to consider is also the kind of process, software process model that the project is have decided to choose. Okay, if you use agile, the way to plan it is different from the one if the project choose to use waterfall. All right, so these are all the things that the project manager need to consider whenever he or she is planning for a project. So, overall activities involved during project management is as follows. Of course, it start with planning. Okay, the project manager need to identify what are the activities who are involved, how long does it take, okay, what are the resources used, and also nowadays because um, nowadays most of the project manager and also in dealing with software will take into account identify the risk. Okay, risks are things that can go wrong. Why this is important? um, by identify the risk, you can actually smaller the scope. Okay, so rather than trying to worry about so many things, so if you identify the risk, the thing that you think might go wrong, so you can scope down your effort and time to solve that, to reduce the risk. Okay, and then people management, of course I've mentioned just now, this is about executing the project, so we are dealing with people, so we need to identify the right person to work with, the kind of attitude, the way of style of working that should be uh, that you should have in a team in order to make sure the team is having very good performance. And then of course you need to report in terms of the progress, what have been achieved so far, so it is related to the reporting. And lastly is about proposal writing. So normally you do this project management in order to get a project outside. Okay, so you need to plan, you need to show that the software team is able to execute the project within the time and the budget given. So you need to show that in terms of writing. Okay, because this is about project planning, so of course you need to identify what are the activities, what are the tasks that you need to identify, right? Which one to be done first and so on. So among the important terms that you need to always consider is the term called milestone. Milestone is a term that is refers to the endpoint. Okay, so it can refer to the time needed. It is more like a deadline, but a short is like if you have a software process model, you have many phases, right? So at each of the phase, you have a deadline, right? So milestone is referring to that smaller or short-term deadline. Okay, deliverables are actually the output. Okay, whether it's um, system a design report, analysis report, or maybe the coding, the test results, that is referring to the deliverables. Deliverables is the output, and milestone is referred to the short-term deadline, especially referring to the phases that you have. Okay, so if you are using waterfall, so it's easy to identify which one the deadline, right, or the milestone, because at the end of each phase there is a milestone. But if you are using agile method where there are many cycles, so there will be more, you need to define the milestone more frequently. Okay, so this is an example of an activities referring to the requirement process where you identify the milestone, and normally at the end of each milestone there is a deliverables. What is deliverables? The deliverables are the output. Okay, so at the end of each of these phase or activities, right, there is a milestone. Milestone is referring to the time. Okay, deliverables are referring to the output. Right, when you are doing the project planning, of course, you need to break down all the tasks that you should execute into smaller parts, and then you need to assign it to the team members. And along the way, you need to also think that possible problems that might arise. Right? If there is a problem, maybe um, uh, for example, you are running behind schedule, so what you need to do, okay, so you need to prepare tentative, you need to identify how to solve the problem. Okay, so that is part of planning. Okay, and then I've mentioned to you that's the job for the project manager, who will plan for the work, break it down, the task, and then allocate resource. Okay, allocate resource is not only to related to who the person in charge, the staff in charge, but also in terms of the hardware that you might need. Maybe at a certain point of time, you need the server to be already ready. To execute the testing and so on, so it should be there rather than when it is when you need to use it is still not available, so it will cause delay. And also when you do the planning, you can have more information about the system, how the project will be executed. So by having that information, you can actually identify, you can actually set the price for that software, okay, how much you want to charge the customer later on. Okay, so taking into account the staff cost, okay, because you have break it down and then you identify who will be in charge. So of course you know how many people will be there. So programmer will be used, how many programmer will be used, how many months they will be required, and then you can set the cost for the staffing. And then how many computers are needed, okay, do you need to buy any additional software to run it, and all those things. So because the information is being broken down, there are lots of details, so it can help the project manager to decide the price of the software that you will be charging the customer. So the entire processes, the explanation that I've provided just now, it can be shown in this activity diagram, okay, where the project manager starts off by identifying the constraint, okay, the time, the budget, how many staffing that they have, okay, what are the possible risks that the customer is focusing on. Is it issue of security? Is it issue of reliability that are worrying the customer? And then you need to identify, okay, what are the milestone, what are the short-term deadline that you need to decide, and at the end of that deadline, what are the output that you want to produce, deliverables. Okay, so having to identify all this, and then the schedule of that project will be defined, okay, and then the start will be doing the work, and of course the project manager will be checking the progress every 2 weeks, right, to ensure that everything is following the schedule. In case some problem happen or it is behind schedule, okay, the project schedule need to be refined. You need to change a bit. Maybe if it's behind schedule, you need to allocate more staff, okay. And then if the problem is so serious, is so behind schedule that you could not that the project manager could not handle it, they will normally have another meeting with the management to find different ways on how to solve the problem. Is either by replanning the project again, or to identify initiate risk mitigation. So we mentioned about risk just now, right? So partly about when you identify the risk, you also think about how to reduce the risk. So at this point of time, you'll be executing uh, actions that will reduce the risk. Okay, if nothing happens, so it will finish. So basically, the project plan will be refined and to change from time to time according to the progress. Right. So when just now we were talking about planning, right? So after we plan, partly the job of planning is also related to scheduling. Okay, scheduling is deciding how the task should be managed. Okay, should the task done sequentially, one after another, or can the task been done in parallel? Okay, so partly when you do scheduling, you need to identify, estimate the time, yeah, because you need to plan, and you need to plan it so that it is within the time constraint given to you. And also you need to identify the effort required, okay, the time required to complete it, who will be doing the task, right? And on top of that, you need to also identify and estimate the resources that will be used for completing a task. Okay, maybe disk space on the server. Okay, the time required to use specialized hardware. Maybe if you are using certain special software, uh, you don't want to use it. Maybe you need to share it with another project, so you need to identify when you will be using the software or the hardware. Okay, and also whether traveling among the staff is needed. maybe the staff need to go to the customer side, or testing need to be done at the customer side. So all those require some time, and also the traveling budget, and also the hotel and so on, right? So that is also needed, and need to be considered during project scheduling. Okay, I've mentioned just now, during planning, you identify important tasks, and normally you need to split it. You need to break down the task, and you need to estimate the time and also the resource to complete each task. Okay, so sometimes can be done concurrently. Okay, and some tasks actually depend on one another, and if this happen, it might cause delay because one task need to be completed before the next one. So you need, if you identify there are some tasks which is depending on one another, you need to focus more on that so that it does not drag the entire process, right? And most of the time the project manager are a more experienced staff, so he or she has more idea, intuition on how to organize the process. Okay. So some of the process that can be used by the project manager in performing the scheduling is, of course, to identify the activities first, then to identify which activity has dependency on one another, and then identify the resource for the activities, allocate the people, and then create project charts. Okay, sometimes uh, you can actually have this in the form of charts or bar charts. Okay, so this is more uh, the for the views of the manager, so that whenever the project manager is monitoring the entire process, it is more viewable for that project manager. All this actually can be recorded in the form of table in Excel, but it does not help in terms of to show dependencies. Okay? So some of the problems in scheduling is that um, uh, the task of estimating is not easy task. Okay, sometimes you you been you only use your gut feeling or your experiences. Okay, estimating the difficulty of the problem. You have to think of things that can go wrong. Okay, and then decide the cause for to provide the solution, right? So, when you are working in a group, sometimes you have staff who are late or might be sick. Okay, so the productivity of the project is not achieving the target, right? So sometimes one way of solving this problem is to by adding more people, right? But if you add more new staff coming in, maybe in the middle of the project, so you'll be having communication problem. So the new guy might not know what's happening before. So if the project manager or the project team does not update him, maybe he do the same mistakes again. All right. So when you are doing the scheduling, you often have to think things that might go wrong. So you always need to have contingency in your planning. So this is additional budget, maybe, and also additional time to handle problem that might arise when the project is being executed. All right. So in project planning, you can either use bar chart or activity networks. It is a more graphical way of showing the project schedule. It shows breakdown of tasks, okay. It shows the dependencies, and it shows the critical path, and also it shows in terms of the time needed, in terms of the calendar time. So it is having this kind of view is more understandable to the project manager. So a simpler way is to show it in terms of tables like this. Alright, so activity 1 will take how long, so it does not depend on any other activities. Okay, M here is showing the milestone. For example, milestone M1 is actually depend on task 1. Okay, so M1 is actually achieved when T1 is completed. T3 is depending on T2. Okay, so before you can T3 can be started, it depend on T1, right? So you can decide, for example, activity 1 takes how long, how many days. So this is more like an estimation, and this takes some experience from the project manager to decide. If, for example, the three five uh, task 5 activities actually taken 10 days, will be taking 10 days, and before T5 can start, it need to make sure that T2 and T4 is completed, and the milestone M2 is only achieved once T2 and T4 is completed. So that's what the kind of information uh, that need to be decided during project management. Not only the task, the duration, the dependencies, and you need to set the milestone. Okay, the milestone is basically a short-term deadline. Okay, so that you don't actually wait for the progress at the end. So M1, M2, and 3 is more like a short-term progress. Okay, so another way of showing the same information is in the form of activity network. Okay, so T1, T2, okay, is showing T1 takes 8 days. Okay, and just now M1 depend on T1. Okay, so this is the deadline. So this is the milestone. Okay, this milestone depend on T1. So this kind of diagram actually shows the dependencies. So it is more viewable. Okay, so it can show the critical path. Critical path is the time taken, the longest time taken. Okay, so this is how activity networks is actually showing the schedule. Okay, another way of showing the scheduling information of a project is through Gantt chart. Okay, Gantt chart is showing it in terms of which one is done first, second, and third, and it shows the time. It's more like a calendar kind of view. Okay, so it shows all this diamond here is actually showing the milestone. Okay, so milestone 1 depend on T1, right? If you still remember. So after T1 is completed, so milestone 1 is achieved. Okay. Okay. So this is more like you can have this kind of view in Microsoft project. Okay. Uh, so it is showing what let's say uh, if the time that the manager is looking at checking the progress is at 8th of August, so he can see which one is still not completed, what is the next activity that he need to monitor next. Okay, so this kind of view is more like a calendar kind of view. Okay, I think okay, this one here is another um, showing schedule, but more from a perspective of the staff being allocated. Okay, so this is showing the person in charge being assigned, and that person is assigned which task. Okay, by having this view, then you know the workload of the staff. Okay, so we know that when the staff should have completed the task, uh, what he's doing at certain point of time. Okay, to make sure that if there is a task which is very critical, you make sure that who is actually in charge. If that person cannot handle it, maybe you need to allocate other staff to help that person. So by having this view, so the project manager have idea who is available, who is not.